It's time to get educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. This is the Dr. Duke Show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show. Before we get started, please hit that share button so we can educate more and more patriots around the country. Okay, we're kicking things off with Vicki McKenna and Culture Cast, one of my favorite segments of the week. Vicki, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Well, let's get people good and stinking depressed. Let's talk today about...
We do that well.
We do that well. The absolute collapse of art and culture in America, in the West today. What happened? We used to be a country that made grand monuments for our war dead on a huge colossal... We built the Empire State Building, it seems like overnight. It took us almost over a decade to replace the Twin Towers with that god-awful building we have now. What happened to us? When's the last time you read a novel by a modern author that you could even get halfway through? What's happened to us with all the culture and all of the achievement of Western culture? Seems like it's not just hitting the brakes, but it seems to be going in reverse.
Oh, I've thought about this quite a bit as well, where you just sort of look around and you say, there's absolutely nothing that doesn't seem to be designed to be ugly on purpose. And if not ugly on purpose, then designed to be as anti, nature as possible, sort of. So think about a lot of the modern art, which looks a lot more like graphic design than it does like art at all, if it is even symmetrical. But most of the actual art you see is bent lines and things that are unattractive and sort of repel you rather than draw you in and ask you to contemplate something larger than yourself. It's almost like an insult, to people in the West who want to have their culture help transform them, help them get to a better place, a higher place, to touch God, essentially. I once listened to Bishop Robert Morlino from the Madison Diocese before he died talk about the importance of the appreciation of beauty and understanding that when the purpose of beauty is to help you understand God. I was thinking about it. We don't do beauty anymore. We do ugly. And if we do ugly, that is the opposite of wanting to ask you to try to figure out a way to get closer to God. And I think that's really ultimately what's been driving this is a hyper-secularization that has resulted in sort of a soul deadening among the people that we should be trusting to produce pieces of art that inspire and that allow us to aspire to something greater. I mean, you could look at art, literature, music, or architecture, and you can see the sort of dead-souled nature of the whole thing. It is not calling anyone to anything greater, or any thoughts, more aspiring. It just sort of sits there and kind of rubs your nose in it, and lets you sort of just, I guess, be surrounded by the dead squalor of it all. Yeah, maybe that's a little harsh.
No, I think it is. I think you hit on something really important. We're embarrassed now. Even modern people who are conservative, we're embarrassed about our history. We're embarrassed about the 2,000-year arc of Western culture. Even those of us who love America, love the West, we're almost afraid to speak out on the beauty of our tradition, the amazing literature we've produced, the music at the highest levels. I mean, we're talking about people like Beethoven and Bach, and the culture the architecture. When you walk around Washington, D.C., it's monolithically beautiful, right? I mean, you have that beautiful classical tradition. You've got the columns. Everything looks really, really beautiful and befitting a culture with our great achievement levels.
True. Now,
look at we were talking just before. Look at the monuments we've built recently, particularly the Vietnam Veterans Monument and some of the other ones you were talking about. Go ahead and cover that with us. What have we done there in Washington lately?
Well, if you take now, with the sort of notable exception of the World War II Memorial, which is absolutely spectacular. I mean, it calls you to quiet and contemplation, and it calls you to think about what these men sacrificed in the Great War, in World War II. It's why we call them the greatest generation. So a monument was built for them befitting of their sacrifice and befitting of what they were doing, which was a defense of Western civilization itself. But if you look at some of the other monuments, so the 9/11 monument, it's difficult to describe. It looks like a bad a bad set from one of the worst Star Trek Next Gen sets. It's just nothing. It's flat. It's ugly. It's metal benches. It says nothing about what happened. It says nothing about the sacrifice. It says nothing about the fight. And and is important, I think it is, that the Vietnam Memorial recognize the 50,000+ people who were killed in that war. The way it is presented tells you nothing about what that sacrifice was for. It tells you not. I mean, so it sort of reinforce, in my opinion, reinforces the insult a little bit of ignoring the sacrifices of the Vietnam vets, because it's just a big, slab of slanted marble with names on it. It doesn't reflect the tremendous amount of courage that it took to go into that war, whether you wanted to be there or not. And it's just, this is how we do it now. If you just drive around your city and look at any new building, any brand new building that's going up, it's an apartment complex, or maybe it's a new office center or something like that. It's a colored box with aluminum or stainless steel accents. That's all it is. It's very Soviet looking. Again, it doesn't call you to think about anything greater or to contemplate anything greater. And our buildings used to do that. Think of the Empire State Building, or even just some of the little churches that you see dotted around the landscape in Wisconsin as you're driving around the rural areas. And that is just something that, I think to do that now is to have the secularists and the humanists give a nod to the great accomplishments of Western civilization that they would like to see torn down. And so ultimately, I think it's a statement against the continued success of our culture and the continuance of Western civilization itself. And again, maybe that's an overstatement, but that's how I look at art. And art is supposed to reflect something more aspirational.
After the break, I want to carry this on with you about other aspects of the culture besides architecture as well. We'll be right back.
Are you a fan of the show? Consider joining the Patriot Club. Your tax-deductible donation of $99 a year keeps us going. Simply visit patriotclub.us. That's patriotclub.us to pledge your support and receive our signature tumbler as a token of our appreciation. We've got much more to come. Stay with us.
All right, back again with Vicki McKenna for the second half of CultureCast. Vicki, great series of observations, I think, in that first segment. Let's talk about that again. It seems that we have so cut ourselves off from our Christian past, 200 years of Christian art and architecture, and we've cut ourselves off from the classical world of Greece and Rome. These are all just now dead white men, racists, slave owners, and they're horrible. So not only are we pulling down, and I think this is much more dangerous than pulling down the statues of these great men, is pulling down the worldview they gave us. So you can pull down Jefferson all you want, take his statue down, but that's not enough. We've got to eradicate the world of freedom and liberty that Jefferson ushered in. He's just one example of tearing down Junipero Serra, the great Christian missionary to the Californian Indians, who did a lot of good work, sacrificed a lot for Native Americans in California, but he was part of a colonialist mission, right? Yes. Bringing Christianity to the Indians. So he's been ripped down from those things. You're not just pulling down the statues, Vicki. You're pulling down the ethos and the worldview. And here's my question. Fine. Get rid of the achievement of Western culture for 2,000 years. You're left with postmodern culture. What do you have left to hold up as an icon or as beautiful or as true? There's nothing less.
And without it, there's no, and this is a declaration of postmodern thought, that there is no truth. The only truth is that there is no truth. And so when that's the way you think, then of course you're going to tear down monuments, and you're not going to value beauty and art or architecture or music or literature. I mean, we could go on about literature too. Ugly sentences that are deliberately grammatically incorrect, that are meant to be jarring and not pleasant and do not lead you anywhere except into misery and depression. We could flip this and just talk about music or literature the same way. But I think you're right. The idea is of the postmodernist is that there is no truth. And if there is no truth, you're going to look around and you're going to see nothing but blandness, nothing but things that are asymmetrical, that don't don't fit, that don't comfort you, that are meant to afflict you, that are meant to be essentially, a giant, not just a rejection of the culture itself, but of the people of the civilization too. It's almost like they want you to be as miserable as possible, in the way that they intend to tear down beautiful things and erect in their place ugly things or asymmetrical things that don't comfort anyone. So, I mean, it all goes to the postmodern rejection idea of the individual, of humanity as something special, of anything unique about or exceptional about human beings. Because if you reject the idea of truth, then you necessarily reject the idea of human exceptionalism.
Well, we went 1,700 years of Western culture to evolving music, expanding music, perfecting music. So you got Mozart and Beethoven and Bach and Brahms, these great composers who were using 150, 100 instruments to bring all this 3-4 hour symphonies, absolutely defining, culture defining. And how do we end up today with rock and roll music, a couple of guitars and some idiot banging on drums, or even worse, rap music? I mean, all of this stuff, I mean, it's the opposite of it. It's just noise in many respects. And one of my favorite quotes from C.S. Lewis is, God created the beauty of silence and the joy of music. Satan can withstand neither one of those. He prefers noise, cacophony, right? When you think about modern culture, I hear a lot of noise, a lot of people screaming, a lot of music that is just a cavalcade of untuned and aharmonic sound being thrown at you. I don't hear a lot of music anymore, genuine music. And God knows ours is a culture with no real silence either.
I agree with you, and I think the same could be said of literature. And when I was thinking about reading C.S. Lewis, it was beautiful to read. He's one of my favorite writers because it's just lovely. If you read it out loud, it sounds lovely. And that's gone now. But you're exactly correct about, in music in particular, noise, asymmetry. And you mentioned C.S. Lewis and That Hideous Strength. There's a scene where one of the characters, Mark, is asked to look at crooked, bent lines and off angles and declare them to be symmetrical and straight. So to reject the idea of that which is true for that which is false, and then call false true and call false good. And that's where we are. I don't know how we allowed our institutions of higher education. That's where most of this comes from. I guess we train artists now in college. I don't know how we allowed the very best and the very brightest and people with access to the great books and to the reservoir of knowledge that we have collected over the course of so many millennia, to destroy it all, to turn it into something that was not going to be available for the rest of us to appreciate in some kind of bizarre, twisted goal of I guess if you beat out great literature, you can beat God out of existence. And maybe they're right, because they seem to be succeeding.
Well, my thought is we've brought so many non-Western people to this country, or let them sneak in, who don't share the values of Western culture but want its benefits. We've told those people now they are the ones who are the cultured ones, and the culture they ran here to embrace has to be torn down in the name of equity. That's where I think we are. A lot of it has to do with the politics, Vicki. This is always, love this segment.
Always politics.
Very thought-provoking. Appreciate your time this week.
Today's show is sponsored by Clean Start Hand Sanitizer. For an odor-free foam hand sanitizer that lasts 2 hours and provides 19 refills, visit freedomproject.com/clean. That's KLEEN to order yours today.
All right, it's time for Trending Left. We've compiled some of the craziest social media content making waves across the internet for your viewing pleasure or revulsion. We start in Florida, where a new bill that forbids teachers from talking to students about sexual orientation or gender identity in school is getting a lot of progressives heated, especially teachers who truly believe that they are the real parents. Watch this teacher scold.
This commenter is saying that, it's their right as a parent to keep their kids in the dark. And my response to them is, you're wrong. Your child is entitled We as a community are responsible for educating our children with sound and scientific knowledge about healthy human bodies, which includes sexuality. We do this for public health reasons so that children are empowered with their bodies.
This is totally typical, right? Moms and dads have no say about when their children are going to be educated about sexuality. Heading now to San Pasqual Middle School in California, where an internal email has surfaced from the assistant principal, which notifies all teachers that a female student would like to be referred to as a male student and that it should be kept hidden from the student's parents. This is a gender support plan for a 7th grader. This is Miss Tammy Lee, a master of education, the assistant principal. There, her, our pronouns, she, her, hers. Here's what it says. From here on out, Rebecca blank shall be referred to as Evan blank. He, they. He will use the girls' bathroom facilities. All students and staff may know. There will not be an announcement in class. Evan's parents do not know. So Synergy and any information that goes home shall say Rebecca blank. Please make note in your subplans to use Evan, knowing the attendance sheet from Synergy will say Rebecca. And in other words, this is an internal message about how to lie and cheat you, mom and dad. The same idiots who say they have that first clip, right? We have an absolute right to teach scientific knowledge to your kids are the same people like this last assistant principal who are going to lie to you about your kids' own gender circumstances. Next, we head to Lincoln County, Missouri, where a math assignment focused instead on the life of poet Maya Angelou, including some sexual questions that are certainly not appropriate for a math test. So notice you have an actual math equation. Then under the math equation is a statement. Angelou was sexually abused by her mother's blank at age 8, which shaped her career choices and motivation for writing. So the next problem does the same thing. It continues with an equation above and the question below saying, trying to support her son as a single mother, she worked as a pimp, a prostitute, and a blank. So again, notice what you're doing. You're having them read the biography of Maya Angelou in math class, taking away from the time spent talking about numbers, and on the exam here. You have a situation where you don't have to know any math at all to get 100%, as long as you've read the book. Moving to Malvern, Pennsylvania, where a $38,000 a year 6th to 12th grade prep school is going the extra mile in teaching its mostly white, mostly rich kids how privileged they are. So in honor of Black History Month, the school made sure several slides were presented in the very lobby of the school right when kids come in so that the parents can see as well. One of the messages was the Black Lives Matter logo. Another had the Black Power fist. And another read, use your white privilege to end your white privilege. Black Lives Matter. It seems to me that if you're running a school that's $38,000 a year and getting all that money from the parents, you progressives are the ones with the privilege. How about using your privilege and take a pay cut or give back some, or forcibly donate some of your salaries to Black Lives Matter issues instead of taking it out on kids who aren't even old enough in some instances to drive yet. Finally, we wrap things up with a guy who completely lost his lunch after learning that a middle school gym class in Wyoming actually spent some time training students on basic firearm safety. In fact, the kids even got to shoot pellet guns as part of the lesson. This is fantastic. Gun safety in a place like Wyoming, where outdoor culture and hunting is huge, but in the minds of progressives, this time must be used instead to indoctrinate kids on how terrible white people are and gender ideology. Watch this clown show doofus go ballistic.
This is in Wyoming. These are 5th and 6th graders, and this is their PE class. This isn't an after-school program. This is during school hours. Let's ban books about history, the Holocaust, slavery in the U.S., all these other things because it might make them uncomfortable, but let's give them guns during a class in school. Let's not teach them about reproductive health and the fact that other humans are different from them, but let's give them guns in school. Let's completely avoid the conversations of the absolutely horrific things that humans have done to one another to make it so that we don't repeat things, but let's give them guns in school. Are you out of your minds? Well, it teaches a responsibility and a way around a weapon. you. This is what's wrong.
You have a real serious issue, go see a psychiatrist, because you act more like the child than those fifth graders handling those guns responsibly ever were. It's time now for some real education. This week, I'm very proud that we're showcasing our Battles of America series. Very proud of this. These short videos are designed to educate adults and children alike on some of the greatest battles in American history. Today, we're looking at the Battle of Trenton in New Jersey in 1776 and its profound significance and importance to the Revolutionary War. Please enjoy.
Battles of America, Trenton. In November of 1776, the Patriots suffered their worst defeat of the Revolutionary War when the British seized the last colonial stronghold at Fort Washington. Besides resulting in the capture of 2,800 prisoners, this decisive victory also forced General Washington to flee toward the Delaware River. The loss of Forts Washington and Lee drove Patriot morale to an all-time low. Knowing that the one-year enlistment requirement for Continental soldiers was about to expire, General Washington relied on a desperate plan to improve morale by driving out the Hessian mercenaries, British allies who were occupying Trenton, New Jersey. The three-pronged attack included Washington's main force of 2,400 troops fighting in conjunction with a diversionary force led by Lieutenant Colonel Cadwalader and a blocking maneuver initiated by Brigadier General Ewing. On Christmas Day, 1776, Washington and his men crossed the icy waters of the Delaware River under cover of darkness. As they crossed, a severe winter storm prevented the advance of Cadwalader and Ewing altogether. Washington and his troops did not make it across until 3 a.m. on the morning of the 26th, 4 hours later than anticipated. Ahead of them lay a 9-mile march to Trenton in the snow and ice. The Hessian commander, Colonel Johann Rall, received word the night before that the Americans were coming, but chose to ignore the warning. As the Patriots approached, General Washington led the main force to the north, dividing his troops into 3 flanks, completely surrounding the city. Once the attack commenced, the Hessians scrambled to establish a defensive perimeter, but it was too late. The Patriots captured Trenton with only 2 casualties, while taking into custody nearly 1,000 Hessian prisoners. Knowing that his exhausted troops could not long hold Trenton, Washington removed his army to a Pennsylvania camp across the Delaware River. The much-needed victory at Trenton restored the confidence and fighting spirit of the troops. More importantly, the victory convinced many Patriots to re-enlist and brought in much-needed new recruits. This revitalized Patriot Army would be put to the test just 8 days later, taking on British General Howe's veteran army at the critical Battle of Princeton.
I'd like to take a moment to thank our Patriot Club members for making these videos possible. Look, the financial support you provide us allows us to do these first-class animations. In fact, we have won more than 5 awards for our children's animational programming. So we want to keep doing this, and all you have to do is join our Patriot Club. Just donate $99 once a year. It's completely tax deductible. All that money will go to creating more really serious educational videos for kids in private and public schools. Some of our videos have made it off the internet and into public schools, where we're really having making a difference in these corrupt public schools with some of these really enriching and student-friendly, education-friendly videos. Simply visit patriotclub.us to get started. And that's going to do it for this show. I'm Dr. Duke. Until next time, please stay educated, my friends.